Hello there, my name is Sixo, but more on that later because we got a robot in disguise over here. Well, kind of anyway, she's still in robot mode at the moment, but I am of course referring to this rather intriguing figure, which, and I've got to get this right, is Transformers Legacy United Robots in Disguise 2015 Universe Strongarm. Now that's a bit of a mouthful, isn't it? And I know some of you might be thinking, this is kind of random, why is he reviewing a toy from like 18 months ago or so? Well look, sometimes I review toys from 1989 or whatever, I just figured this was one I had a few things to say about, so why not? It's all robots at the end of the day, what do you want from me? Besides, and I don't say this enough, I'm actually a big fan of the 2015 Robots in Disguise series. Like, I really enjoyed it. I didn't watch it on first release, but I have seen it since with my son and my wife, and we all loved it. And particularly, Strongarm is just such a wonderful character, so the idea of having her in toy form at long last seemed like a good opportunity. And, especially after she went on discount, let's be fair. But I say that lightly because it turns out there's actually a fair bit to like about this figure, and plenty to talk about besides. We'll get to all of that coming up. Before we get to that though, I should mention that this review is brought to you by TF Source, so you will find a link to their site in the description below, and you can check them out for all your Transformers needs. Now, the eagle-eyed among you may spot that I've actually unboxed Strongarm here already. This isn't how she comes packaged, believe it or not, but that's because I was quite excited to check her out, so do forgive me. Box itself is really colourful, certainly dig that artwork going on there, like that look at the vehicle mode, and there's a neat look at the character in close-up on the side, and she's looking really rather swish, even if she's not exactly accurate to her 2015 portrayal, as we'll no doubt talk about. Anyway, what we're really here to discuss is the toy, and in this case, I didn't really know what to expect from this one, to be honest. I'd heard very mixed reports, I'd heard some slightly damning opinions, and honestly I was kind of keen to make up my own mind, and I'm glad that I did, because actually there's, as I say, quite a bit to enjoy here. Not perfect by any means, but some definite good going on as well. Let's get the obvious point out of the way to begin with. This is a retool of Elita 1, and previously Minerva as well, both of which have got a significantly kind of thinner frame than what we typically think of for Strongarm in the 2015 series, and I kind of get why that's bugged a few people who are maybe expecting this character to be a little bit more beefy, let's say. And it's kind of fair enough, because honestly, a lot of times female Transformers characters are sort of relegated to having this very stereotypical body shape, like the classic female silhouette or whatever, and it's kind of nice when that's mixed up actually. Like, I can think of plenty of female Transformers characters from over the years that have gone against that type and been all the better for it, and in many ways that's what 2015 Strongarm was. She was big and beefy and all the things we far too often just don't see on these characters. That said, this Legacy example has been beefed up a little bit, and she's definitely got some bulk to her thanks to those shoulder pads and the square forearms, the square shins, that kind of stuff. It does add to the effect at least. Maybe the slightly curvy thighs don't really help in this case, because that's not really one-to-one with her classic depiction in the cartoon. Although in many ways I think it's maybe the upper body that could just do with that bit more bulk to it, just that little bit more size to kind of make her feel more in keeping with the cartoon portrayal. Although actually the head is rather large as well, and I think that kind of gives off the wrong impression of what's actually happening with the proportions here. Like, Transformers are rather traditionally pinheads, right? Like, you can look all the way back to 1984 and you'll notice exactly what I'm talking about. They all have really tiny heads, particularly when you compare them to like a classic human silhouette or whatever, and that was always true of Strongarm as well, total pinhead, but not so on this Legacy figure, and I think that slightly larger noggin is kind of throwing those proportions off a little bit, if anything. That said, I do kind of like the head and the face sculpt on offer here. It's certainly bright and colourful, really love that kind of green and the yellow highlights and everything going on as well. I think it looks great, honestly. There's a lot of character in this, and I do kind of get that sense of Strongarm from the cartoon in a weird way, even if there is perhaps one element here that's been a little bit divisive. What am I talking about? Who knows? Yes, okay, the addition of a nose is a strange one, if only because it kind of immediately throws off the feeling of this character coming from that 2015 cartoon somehow. Like, that no-nose aesthetic is so synonymous with that show. So to give her a nose, it just looks a bit weird. I don't know, I don't mind it, but it's definitely different. And look, it's not like there isn't any precedence for the nose. I mean, she has had a nose in some other continuities outside of the original cartoon, most notably in the IDW comics, except I do think a lot of people will have expected this Legacy toy to have taken inspiration from her original appearance, and I think that's fair enough. And I guess really the nose is sort of emblematic of a wider thing going on here, which many people do have a problem with, which is the sort of G1ification of a lot of these later series characters. Like, they've been made to look like classic G1 bots when that's not how they originated, and the nose in this case is just the sort of ultimate example of that. For my part though, I gotta be honest, I don't really mind it. Like, I kind of like what they're doing here, and maybe it's not to everybody's tastes, but those original toys toys do still exist, and I don't know, it's always going to be divisive no matter what they do, I suppose. They've made a choice in this case, it's not going to be for everybody. I don't mind it. I can see why people don't like it. It is what it is. Now, elsewhere, the finish on this figure is actually really good. I mean, you've got a little bit of blue paint and everything going on the chest, little Autobot symbol in there as well. You've got more blue to be found elsewhere on the sides of the arms and the shoulders, so there's paint all around there, as we're going to see in the vehicle mode. The front of these shins is also painted white, and you wouldn't know it actually on first glance, but it all looks crisp. And honestly, the presentation here is pretty good by and large. It's fairly simple, but it does what it needs to do, and I like how she looks. The backpack's not too unwieldy either. It's all fairly tidy. You've got to kind of move a few things around from how she's packaged in the box, but this is, by my estimation anyway, the best that it kind of looks sitting like that. It's fairly neat and tidy. Do kind of miss the classic door wings on Strongarm's usual silhouette. I mean, look, I guess you can kind of rotate them up like this, which is sort of how they were in the cartoon, but they definitely don't stick out enough like proper door wings in my mind anyway. Now, there are a couple of elements that don't work for me so well. Firstly is these little sections, which just kind of hang off the elbows. They're so weird, if only because there's no major need for them. Like, they could have folded in, and I guess that's a budget thing that they don't, but they just sort of hang there and look a little bit unsightly, like there's no real great way to pose them. It's not the end of the world by any means, but perhaps could have been better. Now, obviously the shoulders do take a bit of getting used to as well, because these are on a separate piece to the rest of the arm, so they just sort of sit up the top there. They do get in the way a little bit, like you kind of have to maneuver them out of the way to kind of pose the arms and things like this, but they're not too bad. And as I say, they do kind of bring the bulk that you might want for this figure as well. For me though, there's one element here that really doesn't work for me, and it's these feet. I can't stand these feet, honestly, they're just so bad. The thing is, the angled tilt just moves so awkwardly. You can never get the feet to kind of sit flush on a tabletop or anything like that. And then they do this where they kind of lock out of position, and they're just so awkward. Like, you want to position the ankles, right? Bit of ankle tilt. So just turn that a little bit. There we go. That's not too bad. But then she's quite wide-legged at that point. But then you can't have anything in between. Or it's just that, you know, it does not work at all. Besides that, they just look a bit cheap. Like, they feel totally tacked on to the bottom of the leg, and this black makes it look like she's wearing a pair of school shoes or something. I don't know, it's just bad. And honestly, it is a little bit of a shame, because there's so much to like on the rest of this figure. And, you know, I'll look past the nose and whatever else, but it's the feet that bother me in this case. The feet! Joking aside though, she is still really nice, and there's some good articulation going on as well. I mean, the head moves very freely from side to side, can look up and down a little bit as well, so all good. And as much as there is a bit of a quirk thanks to these shoulders, the arms are actually pretty well articulated. Like, they will come all the way up to the side. You just kind of get that shoulder section going into her head a little bit, but hey, you can kind of move it back and out the way as well. You will get a bicep rotation. There is just over 90-degree bend at the elbow just there, and you even get a little bit of wrist swivel as well, so pretty good actually. Now, there is a waist swivel as well. That is slightly impeded by the backpack, but you can actually move that up and out the way, so then the toy's got all you need in that regard. Now, there's actually a lot more articulation in these legs than you might first imagine, because if you bring the hips all the way up, then they will kind of splay out to the side a little bit, but they do get a good range nonetheless. And there is also a bit of thigh rotation just there, just below the hip, and you get decent bend about 90 degrees at the knee. Did I mention the feet yet? Should I mention the feet again? I don't know. Anyway, look, joking aside, the feet are honestly not a complete deal breaker here. Like, they do take the sheen off, don't get me wrong, but everything else is pretty good and on point, and actually she poses really, really well. Like, there's a definite few quirks to the proceedings, and you kind of need to get the feel for her a little bit, but honestly, once you do that, there's a lot to like here, and she's really good fun. There's also this slightly translucent gun going on, which does look really, really cool. Now, you could peg that into the port on her forearm instead, if indeed you really want to, but I think it looks better in the hand overall. So look, far be it for me to say that this is a perfect robot mode by any means, but I have to say, I do really like it, and particularly for the price that I paid, you know, at a slightly discounted rate, I'm really happy. I mean, there is a genuine, legitimate question mark as to whether this represents the character from the 2015 cartoon well enough, and really only you can answer that in your mind, right? Like, when you look at this thing, does it evoke that character to you or not? You know, I can't give you that answer, but for my money, I do think that this is kind of fun. It's not a one-to-one by any stretch, but it's a nice robot mode, what can I say? Now, in terms of comparisons, here you can see her with a couple of members of the recent Takara Tomy dramatic capture set, who just so happen to still be littering the desk area here, and I thought they might make for a useful side-by-side. And then here you have her with a smattering of other recent generations Autobots from the last few years or more, and for me, it's just really enjoyable to see so many different eras of Transformers kind of brought together under this banner. I'm really enjoying that, and Robot Robots in Disguise 2015 is certainly part of it for me. But of course, that's only half the story, so let's go ahead and check out the transformation, shall we? Now, the first thing you want to do is just rotate this section down and actually clip these arms together like so. That's where those pieces come in, because they kind of slide into there, so that is their functionality, but still kind of strange to me. Of course, then you want to do the same thing over this side. Now, the next thing is this backpack section, and that starts with actually folding this whole bit out from underneath there. Then you want to get these windows back down and sitting clipped into place. Same goes over here. And then this bonnet bit can just kind of fold all the way down and kind of just bring it vaguely into place for now. You want to rotate the waist all the way around. There's these little panels on the inside of the legs that just flip out. Same over here, like so. And then these legs kind of concertina up like so into place. Same on this side, there's just like a double joint inside the shin just there, so it just folds all the way up. Then if we come around to the underneath, you can just tab those two bits together, and then really it's just a question of getting it all tabbed in, like these bits on the back just kind of slot in at the sides once you get it all lined up. Similar stuff with the bonnet, you just want to get it lined up and into place, and then it tabs in pretty easily. And to be honest, most of the rest of it just kind of falls into place. You want to make sure those arms are just kind of tabbed in just there, and then this back piece with the legs will kind of come in at the side. But generally speaking, most of that kind of happens pretty naturally in my experience, just kind of tends to take shape. And then the final stage is also my least favorite, because you guessed it, it's those feet, isn't it? You got to fold them away, such as it is, like so. And there we go, we're done. And honestly, nothing complicated about that whatsoever. It's quite an enjoyable, repeatable process. I really don't mind it. As for the result, again, I've heard some discussion about whether this is really a truly appropriate representation of Strongarm in her vehicle mode or not. I can leave that up to your interpretation maybe, but I will say that for my money, it kind of works actually. Like, I don't know, if you look at the cartoon model directly side by side, then sure, you might be able to nitpick it a little bit, but honestly, it's not that far off, and to me, as I say, it works. I think this is really good, and it doesn't particularly feel like a retool of Elita 1 here to my eyes, so pretty successful in my opinion. Now, this light bar is on a separate piece. It actually comes packaged separately in the box, but you can just plug it in like so, and it doesn't look bad, but I do wish that the colours were a lot more saturated and vibrant maybe, because this is just a little bit dull, to be honest. It doesn't really pop in the way that you might want it to. Paint on the bonnet all looks really good, but again, it might have been nice to have a little teeny tiny Autobot logo just there, because there is one in the cartoon if you go looking for it, and again, just that little bit of colour might have added something, I don't know. Similarly, in the show, she often has like bright blue bits on the bumper, like lights and stuff, and that could have been enjoyable. You know, on the whole though, I don't have many complaints here. I mean, it's just kind of big, chunky fun. It looks basically as it's supposed to. It rolls quite nice. I mean, it sort of sits on a flat surface pretty well. My only real genuine grumble here, and boy is it a doozy, is those feet, because this is not it, man. That's not it at all. Come on. Like, I get it, the feet had to go somewhere, but it does kind of feel like maybe there was room for just, I don't know, an altogether different solution here, because this just looks pretty bad, to be honest, at the rear end. It's unfortunate because the feet are not satisfying at all in robot mode, and then they don't work here either. So it's just a bit kind of, I don't know, what are we doing? Like, of all the many options we could have taken with those feet, I'm just not convinced this was the one, you know? But I guess it is what it is. It's a real shame, because otherwise there's a lot to like here. And you know, on balance, I do think that she's pretty good fun. I mean, you can kind of put the gun in the back there like so, if that's a thing you want to do, like an I'll drive, you shoot type scenario. The other alternative is that you can plug the little gun in on the side like so, and I think that's what kids today call Evo Fusion. All in then, I'm not feeling too critical of this vehicle mode, honestly. I feel like it's a decent enough representation of the cartoon model. It does kind of look like the truck from the cartoon, and I kind of like it. You know, the feet hanging off the back is very bad. Like, that is really egregious, but other than that, there's a lot to like. And again, I maintain, I think there's a lot of benefit from having this kind of melting pot of different characters from over the years, all under the Generations banner. I mean, here you can see her with Legacy Jason. I think that's just really enjoyable to see these two police-themed characters kind of meeting at long last. I don't know, it works. And by and large, that's kind of my assessment of Legacy Strongarm overall. Definitely not a perfect toy, and those feet are horrendous. But honestly, I don't really have some of the major grumbles that maybe some other people have. You know, as a representation of the character, I think this fits fairly well. Sure, she's got a nose, and that's a little bit strange, but I can look past that. And certainly for the price I paid on this occasion, for me, it's got to be a toot. Now, as I said earlier, today's review is brought to you by TF Source, so you will find a link to their site in the description below, and you can go ahead and check them out for all your Transformers needs. I'd also be very grateful if you could leave me a like for today's video, but otherwise, that's it from me. So have a great rest of your day, and TTFN.